Beyond the Rut is a proud member of the Lima Charlie Network.
I think any job that forces you to make a choice that compromises your values. I think that definitely, because that was what was going on in Iraq. Like, yeah, I loved doing, military stuff. I loved going to the field. But then I'd gotten to a place that went against my own values, that, every life is precious, no matter what. And here I'm in a war zone breaking a man's ribs on my daughter's birthday.
Welcome to Beyond the Rut, the podcast that shares encouraging stories and practical tools to help pull you out of your rut and live a life worth living. I'm your host, Jerry Dugan, and actually I'm not your host today. Ken Carfagno, last week's guest on Beyond the Rut, took over the microphone in August 2021 at Podcast Movement and decided he was going to interview me for my own show. So weird. But when he came up with the idea, he told me where he wanted to go with it. I said, you know what? I think you're onto something. Let's try this. So this is episode 300 of Beyond the Rut. And to celebrate this milestone, Ken felt that the best thing for us to do was to open up the doors, let you see behind the scenes, and get to know the host, me, just a little bit more. So we're going to dig a little bit into my life, what inspired me to live life beyond the rut, and then what was a rut that I have been facing for a very long time. A lot of people think maybe I've got it together, or maybe I think I've got it together. That is so far from the truth. Just like anybody else, I face struggles, I face my own ruts, and it's this mantra of living life beyond the rut that gets me moving the needle forward in life and enjoying life to the fullest. So, sit back and relax unless you're throwing, hot potatoes at each other, because why not? Here we go.
Well, welcome back to Beyond the Rut podcast. This is not Jerry Dugan. Either that or I'm an amazing ventriloquist. But I am a guest host today. This is Ken Carfagno from the Smart Cleaning School podcast. And I have become a new friend of Jerry here at Podcast Movement 2021. And I was asking him about his podcast. And I said, Jerry, you help so many people by interviewing them and finding out what their rut was and bringing those people to your audience. I said, Jerry, has anyone ever asked you what your rut was? And he kind of covered his face and said, no. I said, well, what if we turn the tables? You can interview me and then I'll interview you. He says, ooh. So Jerry, what do you think about that?
I got very nervous when you threw that out there. And I was like, dang it. Okay. So you were put in front of me for a reason. Most likely because it was Vincent's fault. He introduced us.
Let's give a shout out.
Yeah. Vincent Pugliese, we're coming after you. No kidding. But yeah, I thought it would be very interesting because you'd asked when's the last time I shared my story or if I ever shared it on the show. And, years ago when I talked about the happiness advantage, I gave just a sliver of it. So I've shared my story on other shows, but not this one to this audience. The folks listening right now, I haven't really shared it all with you.
All right, everyone. You want to hear Jerry's story? Okay, I'm waiting. What'd you say?
Yeah, let's do this.
Okay. All right. I'll take that as a yes. Let's start right here, Jerry. Yesterday, we were talking to a new dad. His name is Ben. The three of us were talking.
Oh, yeah.
I shared a story, and you were just nodding along. I think both of us were welling up. I shared the story that, you know what, I was at this camp up in the Adirondacks, just me and my 8-year-old son. And, some of these places, these campgrounds with these pristine lakes and cabins, they're like the land that time forgot. Time just stands still at these places. And this is a father-son retreat that I've gone to multiple times. Shout out. It's called Northern Frontier in the Adirondacks. Christian camp. It's awesome. But I brought 3 of my sons through it twice. One of my next son will be in 2 years. But I'm in this cabin with my 8-year-old. And I look over in the corner of the cabin and I see vividly, Jerry, my 6-year-old son, Kenny, who's now 16. And I see him. I see me, the 34-year-old version of me. I see the 6-year-old version of my son, Kenny, as I'm there with my 8-year-old. And it was vivid like I was there. And I just had this profound moment that the proverbial, hey, if you just snap your fingers, time just flies by and your kids grow up before you know it.
Yeah.
And I was sharing that. And Jerry, you started welling up. Because this guy, Ben, has little kids, right?
He does. I think the oldest is, 7 or 8?
Yeah. And so at 6, 7, and 8, you're like, oh, my kids, I'll have them forever. And I still have some young ones. But I wanted to just relate that story to you. And, what was it that really triggered some emotion? Because you said your son is 20, 21 years old?
Yeah, this month. Well, we're recording August 2021. and my son turns 20 this year. So my baby boy, the guy who I saw born in Germany, the first thing I saw of him was his rear end, just by the way the doctors pulled him out. And, that kid, that screaming, hungry child, is now 20. He's going to be 20. And I was just thinking, man, I mean, when he was born, folks I would consider old at the time would be like, oh, enjoy them now because before you know it, they're going to be grown up. And I'm like, yeah, whatever, old person. And then our daughter was born less than 2 years later, Emma. And so Jacob's my son, Emma's my daughter. My daughter just graduated high school like just a few months ago. And, we're sending her off to college in a couple of weeks. And so my baby girl is 18 years old, and my son's 20. And so the day that I knew would always come where my wife and I are empty nesters is just 2 to 3 weeks away. And, so it really did fly by. Like the elementary school years seemed normal. It was just like, all right.
You felt like you had forever, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. And all of a sudden middle school hit and that's when the snap happened.
The
Thanos snap in a way,
And 10 years blew past.
Just
8
so
to
fast.
10 years.
Yeah.
And I bring that up, Jerry, because just thinking about your show, Beyond the Rut, I mean, there's probably a lot of men that feel this, and I would love to hear your story, your version of this. But maybe there's guys out there that they have these, these kids that are young, and they think, oh, I've got plenty of time with them. They're in a rut. I got them. I go to work, come back. Go to work, come back. I still got them. And then there's the other guy listening to this. Maybe they're in their 50s, and they got kids that are 20, 21, 22, and they're still in the rut, and they look at their kids. Boom, they're 21. Does this speak to you at all? I mean, did you have a time period in your life where time flew by and you were in a rut and you oh, boy, I wish I wouldn't have missed those years? Or I don't know. Like, was there a time frame like this for you?
I don't know if it was my own rut, but I think seeing my parents miss out. So my parents were both involved when my brother and I were little, and then they did divorce when I was 11 and my brother was 9. And so from there, like now my dad's a single parent. And so he's, we talked about your dad and his work ethic, on another episode, and my dad worked hard. So he worked Monday through Friday. He was a military policeman in the U.S. Army. And on the weekends to make ends meet, because, we were living in California. It's expensive there. My dad's doing extra work for my grandfather in the furniture refinishing business my grandfather has. And so, like, I saw my dad early morning when he took off to work. I'd see him maybe in the evenings, and then I hardly saw him on the weekends. And so from 6th grade through my high school years, my dad missed almost every concert I was in. I played tuba.
Played tuba?
I was into heavy metal. Yeah, in a big way. Sorry, bad joke.
Heavy metal.
Get this guy off his own show.
That was terrible.
Dad jokes are still good.
Can we edit that out?
No, I'm keeping that one in. You guys, you got the door.
It's his show. I'm hosting, but it's his show. You can keep it in, Jerry.
Oh man. So I played tuba. I was really good. I got recruited into college to play tuba, although I kind of switched gears on the band director and chose pre-med as my major at the last minute. But my dad, I think out of all the concerts I performed in, saw one or two. I played Little League Baseball. I played high school baseball. And out of all the games I played, I think my dad caught 1 or 2 games. I played 4 years of high school football, and I'm pretty confident my dad missed every single game, all because he was having to go up to my grandfather's to work. And I just got to see through his eyes in the sense of, like, my dad has no clue who I am. And I don't hate him for it. I'm sad because he's working so hard to support my brother and I, making the best he can out of this post-divorce life. And, it gave me a chance to see at a young age, I don't want to be there. And so what's the root cause of this? Well, his marriage didn't work out. So I need to not get there. And so what are the things that made his marriage fail? He's a loving guy, very sacrificial guy, but he really just doesn't know how to romance his wife. Yeah. And so that's what wound up happening was my mom felt that my dad didn't love her. And so when somebody else came along and showed like, oh, I love you, gave attention to her, the things that she was craving, then that's what opened the door for what led to their divorce. And so those are the things that happened at a young age for me to say, I'm going to intentionally be the person who will not give my wife a lot of excuses to fire me, in a sense. So I think I was fortunate in that respect to to recognize that and say, I will choose my family over career. And for the longest time, lived up to it. So I was in the Army for a little bit. That's how I met my wife. And I left the Army because even though I love deploying. I was the guy that, send him out to the field. Why? Because he likes it. And I'm like, what's wrong with him? I don't know. He likes this. Like he went full hua in the Army. So it's the Army war cry, hua. And so they kind of jokingly say, never go full hua. But I did. And so I loved going to the field. I'm like, yeah, this is what we trained for. I want to put the gear on. I want to run around and pretend you guys got shot up because I'm a medic and that's what I trained for. I don't want you to really get shot though because, that hurts apparently. But then I deployed to Iraq and I realized, wait, I could have been killed.
This is real.
Yeah. This is 2003. I was on the tail end of my first Army enlistment, contemplating re-enlistment. And, when we got back from Iraq and we had our awards ceremony. And
you were married at this point?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I'm telling my story all out of time. That's kind of how my head works.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Power of editing.
Yeah. We'll just cut and piece everything back together. This is the timeline, guys. So
this episode's in a rut.
Yeah. Already, man. It's only been 5 minutes.
You're
Sorry,
doing
guys.
great.
In 1999, I joined the Army. I met my wife in 2000, 2001. We got married in 2001, right after 9/11. And, 2003, get shipped off to Kuwait with my unit. And a couple months later, we invade Iraq. And, we come back to the States and we're talking re-enlistment. And it just kind of hit me wait, I can re-enlist. I'm on a trajectory now. I can make rank very fast. I can make that position. I can get that, as far as soldier pay goes, I'd make the big bucks, and life will be good. I'll get the leadership development. I'll retire by the time let's see, what time I joined at 23, so I would have retired with a pension at 43 years old for life. And so all those things were going for me. But then I realized, I just spent 7 months away from my family. My son had a growth spurt in the time I was gone.
So how old was he during deployment when you started?
So he was just a year old. And
so you missed his whole 1 year.
Yeah, that whole, from 1 to almost
That's a lot of
2.
changes in that time.
Yeah. He went from little, big head, blue eyes.
learned how to walk.
Yes.
You left and he was crawling. You came back. You missed that.
Yes. Yeah.
But you served our country.
Yeah.
So, there's so many of us, including myself, thank you so much, Jerry, for serving our country.
Thank
you.
Amazing. Yeah, it comes
It's
with a
sacrifice. But for all the men and women out there serving our country, it's a sacrifice, and you're willing to do it because you have a heart of service. It doesn't make it any easier. So now you've missed that whole year.
I missed the birth of my daughter. She was 3 months old when I met her.
Did that take you back to your dad at all?
A little bit, yeah, in the sense that it was a different kind of missing out on my kids growing up. And missing out on my wife and having that connection with her. So for my dad, it was out of necessity to raise and to support his family, to provide. And for me to pursue a career that I really loved, which was the U.S. Army and all the things the Army does. I was the country was on a trajectory that wherever I go, I'm going to a unit that deploys because that's already in my record. This guy is a field medic. He's gone on a Kosovo deployment. He's gone to war. Send him to a place that's getting ready to plus up their unit to go overseas. So I was on that path. And so that's when I said I was going to make rank quickly. I was going to deploy a lot. And so I had really contemplated about this. What matters more? This Army career? What am I really going to do? Write a memoir? No. And if I get blown up.
But you're not a Private Ryan.
No. And I was in as a medic, so it wasn't like they're going to make a movie out of me. Well, Hacksaw Ridge, I guess.
I was just about to say Hacksaw Ridge.
Yeah.
Can you tie that kind of a bowline knot and hang someone off that stump?
If I had to, I guess.
Yeah.
I'd prefer not to.
That was a cool scene.
That
Saved
was,
75 people off that
did.
ridge.
Yeah, talking about power of God. That dude. That had to be a nightmare for him. Yeah, and today's military.
He wouldn't even carry a weapon.
No.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Little sideline there.
Yeah. In a sense, kind of lucky that you didn't have to carry a weapon because you have to not let that thing out of one arm's reach of you. So if I, was in his situation, I'd have to do all that with my M4 on my back or in my hands and take care of patients. So yeah, in some ways,
the weight of responsibility. I'm just thinking about this. Your dad, he left you.
No, he stayed.
Well,
when you were a
kid, right?
Yeah.
He left and he's working.
Yeah.
He's missing the time.
Yeah.
You're missing the time, but not only are you missing the time, you've got to keep your eyes open. And I think in the back in the episode where you interviewed me, we talked about you've got to stay moving. If you don't get moving, you're going to get stagnant. You're going to get complacent, get comfortable, and eventually, like an oasis, just get burned out. I think you could not stay stagnant. You had to watch 24/7 because you could be killed, right? So you had an added pressure. Did that extra pressure, like how did that affect you and like even the relationships with your family because you were at a distance? Like,
oh yeah. Now it hit me in a weird different way. So in the deployment, a couple of things are going on. So on the one hand, to stay alive, because that heightened sense of awareness, and we're getting drive-by shootings on us in our compound in Baghdad. By the time we got to Baghdad, drive-bys on us every night, people breaking into our compound to steal, nothing, not really to come after us, but to steal like the aluminum rods in the compound. We were sitting on apparently a missile manufacturing compound. We didn't know it, and so we're like, why do you keep breaking into our compound? Well, we don't have interpreters, so we eventually caught a looter who spoke English. And so we're like, what the heck? Why are you breaking into our compound? And the guy's like, you got aluminum rods over here. You know how much those are worth? We're like, we don't care about these aluminum rods. They're not ours. And they're like, well, they're in your compound. I'm like, so you're stealing from us? And they're like, well, are they yours? We're like, we really don't care about these rods. What? And so anyway, I already got on a tangent.
Digress, right?
But before we got to that point though, like, I've put on like this menacing face. I'm chasing people down. I'm kicking people in the ribs. On the day that my daughter was born, I'm pretty confident I broke a man's ribs. And so on the day I know my daughter's being born by C-section. And I mean, that broke me down. I'm like, who am I becoming? And then on the flip side, I'm writing a letter to my wife. Hey, I love you. I can't wait to be home. I miss you so much. Please tell Jacob I love him so much.
You're in a fight or flight
mode
at work.
Yeah. And then I sign that letter. I put it in an envelope. I'm like, what the F are you doing? Get the F down off that wall. I'm going to shoot you in the back of the head. It's just like a very different type of person. And that conflict, those are two completely different ends of the spectrum. And I was like, I don't want to bring this monster back home. I wasn't even a Christian yet then. And all I knew is I don't want to bring this monster home. So this monster either needs to die here. No, it just needs to die here. And so I pretty much was convinced I was going to die. That this is it. There's no way this monster's coming home. The only way to prevent that is this monster has to die. Completely unaware of like the spiritualness of what I was just saying in that moment. Cause like when you're a new creation in Christ. So the old you dies. And then you're born again into something new. I didn't understand that. I just knew that this monster had to die. So when I come home, so to answer the question, what kind of impact did it have on my family? I mean, there were just moments where I wasn't as tender as I should have been. So like if my son skinned his knee, I'm like, why are you crying? Snap out of it. Like I was like Sergeant Dugan, not Dad. And shooter games, this might be more PTSD type of stuff, but I would get really intense with like shooter games when my son is older. And so we eventually decided as a family, Dad doesn't play Call of Duty or, Modern Warfare 3 or whatever it is. And it's because, it's just, it brought out a side of me that needed to go away. Yeah. So there was that rut. But I think if we're trying to land on a rut, I know the biggest rut that hit me was, so I get out of the Army in 2003.
Well, I just want to go back
real
quick.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So let that monster die, right?
Yeah.
I just had this like, this parallel. Now, many of the listeners here have not fought overseas. Now, there are many that have, I'm sure, but many have not. But there is a war zone in some people's works. Like they go into their job and they could be in a position where they're feeling like they're going to war and they might be turning into that monster. So this story, although you might not have been to war, but do you relate to this? Have you ever been to your job and felt like you're going to war? Like you've got to put on like your armor to protect yourself. And are you even aware that you're turning into that monster? Just like you had to realize you were overseas becoming this monster and you didn't get to see your family up close. But imagine if someone was becoming a monster just from their job in a rut, trying to protect themselves, and now they're coming home and they're acting this way, toward their family. So I see that there's a possibility there might be a lot of men out there.
Yeah, because I think any job that forces you to make a choice that compromises your values. I think that definitely, because that was what was going on in Iraq. Like, yeah, I loved doing, military stuff. I loved going to the field. But then I'd gotten to a place that went against my own values that, every life is precious, no matter what. And here I'm in a war zone breaking a man's ribs on my daughter's birthday.
And it doesn't have to be life or death. It could be, I want to be with my family 50 weeks out of the year. But now you have a new job where they're going to say, hey, you need to travel 20 weeks of the year. And what are you going to do about it? Right? Because that compromises your values. And once you compromise once, it becomes easier to compromise. And that can turn you into that cold-hearted monster that you were talking about. And what does that leave for your family? And so you came back from war, right? And then talk about your post-war kind of family life, work life. Let's dig into that part of your story.
And so, post-war, very intentional. So, I mean, the reason I left the Army was I didn't want to leave my family ever again. And so we'll have to bring up, what am I doing now? Because
absolutely.
Jerry, aren't you a hypocrite? So very intentional though. It's like I'm getting out of the Army because I'm going to spend that time with my children while they're young. I want my children to know who their dad is. I want my wife to love me so that when we are empty nesters, we have a marriage that goes on for the rest of our lives. And I want those lives to be long. And so, very intentional in that respect. And, my first job out of the Army was as an education coordinator for a healthcare organization. So I'm in charge of orientation for new employees. I'm a liaison for a high school health sciences program so they can do rotations in our hospitals. It was fun. And I got to go home every day at 5:00. And I had a good paid time off program. So if I needed to take a day off to be with my family, I could. I'm home every weekend. You gotta stay late. I had a supervisor who was really big on work-life balance. So
that's rare.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I'd been blessed with just about every supervisor I've had since I left the Army has been big on work-life balance. And, so there's that. I mean, it's just very intentional. I'd say my kids will tell you that I've been there for them. I volunteered in their schools. There's a program called Watchdogs when they were in elementary school. Dads of great students, where they want father figures in the school all day. And they don't just have you follow your child around all day. They use you as everybody's dad. And so you're like, the first time I volunteered, my daughter was in kindergarten. My son was in second grade. And, so they had me in their classes for an hour each. And the rest of the day, I was like in a third grade class. I was helping fifth graders solve math problems. I was, opening up little ketchup packets at lunchtime for everybody and getting random hugs from kids whose dads weren't home or whose dads were at work and couldn't be a watchdog. And that just reinforced that I needed to keep doing this. And so,
you're really, I mean, the first question I started this interview with was about, taking that blink, right? And after 10 years, boom, the child is much older. But in that snap of the finger, there's a million memories. And I think a lot of dads might have 1,000 memories. Other dads have 1,000,000 because they were intentional. They were there. Your dad, from what you're telling in your story, he had 100 memories in that snap, maybe. But you have 1,000,000. And what you saw in your dad, you didn't let repeat. You broke that generational thing that probably went back a few. And so, like, dads out there listening to Jerry's story, are you the dad that needs to break that curse? Was it your dad that broke it? Are you having that chance to continue on and be like Jerry? Or maybe you are the one that is like Jerry's dad and you're just working. All you know is one dimension, like that one F that you guys talk about in your scorecard, right? Of just working hard. And so you heard you experienced something that you didn't want to experience. So now going forward, it sounds like you've been proactive, intentional, but here we are, we're talking about Beyond the Rut. Jerry, your life seems like it's been pretty amazing and you're so intentional.
Well, yes. No kidding.
Okay. But let's go behind door number 2 and see, Jerry, give me an example of when you fell into a rut.
All right.
Let's go there.
Because there is one, believe it or not, guys. And that was, so I'm in that first job out of the Army. And it's a financial rut. So those 5 circles we've been talking about, the 5 F's, my rut is the finance one. And off and on, I would say fitness is a roller coaster ride. And so right now I'm on the, Jerry got a little chunky part of the ride. And in a few months, I'll be in the Jerry's fit as heck part of the ride.
Cherry Garcia.
Yeah. Ice cream is good. Lunch yesterday was a slice of cake and some ice cream. And I was like, this is why, Jerry. Yeah. And dinner was, anyway, that's not important. So the financial rut. And, so this is like a generational thing that both my wife and I have been working hard to get away from, but there's still some mindset shifts that need to happen. And so I'm trying to remember what year it was. I think it was 2005, Christmas time, 2005. We had a credit card that I got out because my dad had a heart attack in like 2004. We didn't have cash. We got a credit card so I could fly to California and be with my dad. He's still alive and well. And, his life is an example of a miracle because he's had enough heart attacks to kill him and he's still walking around. He's got type 2 diabetes, still walking around. Like the guy shouldn't be walking and he's walking. It's like, all right, Dad, you shouldn't really be tempting death, but, it's funny. You're like telling death to go away. So that's coming back. Credit card. It's maxed out. I spent all of 2005 paying that credit card off. And it was probably like a $6,000 balance, maybe a $4,000 balance. Not huge as, what other credit cards can be. And I'd spent all year taking every little bit I could to pay that off without compromising our lifestyle. So that was kind of the challenge. My wife didn't want us to like go Dave Ramsey and like, cut out superfluous expenses.
Rice and beans.
Yeah. And like there was no pay this thing off in 2 months, which we probably could have done if we got sacrificial like that. So it took all year. Got it, from January till November, paid it off. I was like, that's great. And then we had Christmas, and I woke up not on Christmas Day. Christmas Day was fine. We got up, we opened presents, we played A Christmas Story on TNT for 24 hours. Like
of course.
You're supposed to.
Watched it 4 times.
Yeah. But not in sequence. Like I watched like the middle 15 minutes and then like the beginning 15 and the end. That's how the movie.
It's kind of like a podcast.
Yeah.
You just edit. You take the pieces you want.
Yeah. It's like how I'm telling my story. It's, we're in the future. Now we're back in the past. Now we're back in the present. Back in the past.
You just need a DeLorean to do that.
Yes. Oh man. It's, I don't have a DeLorean, but I got an imaginary one. And so on December 26th, the day after Christmas, we gave our kids a great Christmas. Nice toys. We got it on video. We watch it all the time.
And the kids were how old?
Roughly, gosh, I got to do the math here.
Like 10, 11?
Son is no younger. My son's probably about 5.
Okay.
And my daughter's about 3.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I wake up that morning, 26th December, 2005, and I just realized our credit card is back to max.
And you didn't even see it coming?
No.
Wow.
I didn't even put it on there.
Oh.
Yeah. My wife.
Ouch.
My wife was managing the finances ever since I deployed to Iraq. And so when I talk about there's a mindset shift that was needed, it's a couple of things, just a lot of things. But yeah, she'd maxed out the credit card.
Deflated, right?
Yeah.
Is that how you felt?
Yeah. Oh, so much so. I was like, I spent all year paying off this credit card. Mm-hmm. We just maxed it back out.
But you said a pronoun I just caught. You just said, I spent the whole year paying it off.
Yes.
It sounds like it's possible, Jerry, that it wasn't we spent the whole year. We fixed all this because.
Yeah.
And so is there a point when the pronoun changed from I to we and you were on the same page? It sounds like this is a time in your life where there was a little bit of you went intentional on your marriage, but there's this area of marriage and finance that, like, as you're saying, you were in a rut and it was just moving along. Got the good job, and you said she was a stay-at-home mom? Yep. And stay-at-home moms, it's a tough gig. My wife's been home for 16 years. And it's very easy when they get bored. Not that they do often because they're always working, but there can be times that it's like, oh, I want this. And they see some ad on YouTube, I want this. And if the credit card is that accessible, I don't know. Everyone does their finances differently, right? But in your world, I just heard those pronouns. And
yes.
So keep going.
So yeah, when did the pronoun shift to we? I would say
that next year in 06, or is it longer?
Longer. I would say more recently, to be honest.
Oh wow! So we're talking about financial rut that's like a decade.
Yeah,
and it wasn't a big one. Like I think in the episode you were interviewing me, we talked about ruts. They can be different sizes. They can be a groove. That, you bear like the groove in the sidewalk. It's not a big rut, but it's still a rut, right? It's just enough for water to go through it and make a little like path through this. But there's other ones that could be like a chasm. They can be deep. And so yours was shallow.
Yeah.
But little by little, it got deeper and deeper, right? And maybe after the 10th year, you looked up and it's like, oh, that's a lot bigger than it used to be.
And Yeah, I would say summer of last year is when the pronouns started to shift.
Wow. What caused that shift?
I'm still digging into that, and it's interesting. So
I see what you did there. You dug into it. I see what you did there.
Yes,
Jerry is very clever.
So there's gosh,
I just threw you off.
I know. I'm trying to word it in a way that it doesn't sound like I'm blaming my wife for it all. Because I mean, I definitely have a part in it.
Absolutely not. No, it's a we thing. We both did this to ourselves.
So it sounds like going back to 2006.
Yes,
I realize, and then I'll come back to this other thing. Okay. So in 2006, I wake up that 26th of December and realize credit card's maxed out again. We're gonna have to spend all year paying it back off.
Yeah.
And
the tires are spinning in mud.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so to pay this off, by the way, nothing's going into savings to cover emergencies.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. That's the big uh-oh. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
And, I read Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. And so I know what needs to be done, and we don't have it. And to get there, like what do I do first? Because this card's maxed out. The payments are ridiculous, and I can't not pay that. And so I just talk with Liv, and I'm like, we got to do this. I think we need to do these baby steps. We need to get $1,000 set aside, and she's like, okay. So that was the kind of thing. So I do get $1,000 set aside. We have an emergency. It's not even an emergency. It's like we want to make a big purchase, and I don't want to use their credit card. So this emergency is the $1,000 emergency fund. And like
the spending habits didn't change.
No, it did not.
But you had the $1,000 in place, and the credit card's being paid.
Yes.
But I want to get this thing. It's $500. I got $1,000 sitting over here,
and I want it now. And
I want it now.
I don't even remember what the thing is. That's how
none of your listeners would do this.
No. Yeah, probably not. I don't know. If you do, let me know. And so I saw it in December of 2005 that if nothing changed in how we looked at money in our career, I'm going into the rat race, and I don't want to be in the rat race. And I tell my wife, I don't want to be in the rat race. There's no quality of life there. We're going to miss out on so much if we fall into this rat race. And we still haven't, I don't think, resolved what's going on with my wife as far as why saving's a bad idea for her, and why credit is okay for her, and why why does she not accept my aversion to credit? And so there's like all these whys, and some of the things that have come up over the years though is she's intimidated when we talk about money, and I'm like, but I'm not. I get frustrated eventually, yes, but. Like, I don't say, we will do this, or this is my house, my paycheck, you must do what I say. Like, I've never been like that. But I will get passionate and say, if we change nothing, this $100 balance on the credit card will become a $10,000 balance on the credit card. The payment will become this.
Did that scare her when you say that? Did it cause her to think, like, wow, you're probably right? She
would just say, okay, we'll do what you want. And then I'll stop the conversation, and then I'll go to make the payment and we'll create a plan, a budget, and I'll go to make the first payment, and there's no money there for that. And it's like, what happened? And so it's just been this kind of repeat.
Remember when we talked about with your dad, and like these cycles repeat, like what you saw your dad, you broke it, but in many men, they just repeat generation. Yeah. And I've seen this, maybe you have too, but with your wife, it's not necessarily her fault. It's probably the way that she saw her parents with money. Like if you study how is your wife and how is her parents when she was growing up as a little girl, a lot of times they might hang on to, if they're big savers, because they saw everything go out of the house, or maybe there's habits that were instilled in them, and it's hard to bring that into your marriage. And so you gotta tackle some of those things. It's hard.
Yeah. And there's a strong association. I know one of her parents, very good with money. Retired from this parent. I'm trying to keep the gender out of it so it doesn't identify too much.
Yeah, you're being brave, by the way. You're having a lot of courage sharing this with your audience.
Yes.
I think that your audience is really appreciating that you're opening up like this, and I think it's awesome.
Yeah,
I admire that you're doing this.
Thank you. So one of her parents, very good with money, retired at the age of like 52, 53 years old.
Right.
Millionaire. Also married and divorced 3 times.
Oh, wow.
So there's this connection that having money
leads to
not having family.
Gotcha.
And family's important for her. So the other parent, carefree in the spending, happy as can be. But then, if an emergency pops up, there's some stress. There's no way to cover it. And
She saw money as the problem because when we had money, our family went downhill. And so we have with you, hey, we have money. I need to get rid of it to protect my family. It could be something that simple, more of, that's like a fight or flight for your wife, where in your case, fight or flight was you're in war. And there could be many wives dealing with this. And like to get together, that's a difficult thing to do. So, okay, so come back now, right? It's 2006 to 20. Like talk about that era.
Yeah, it's kind of a repeat. And so at some point, I don't even remember which year it is. I wouldn't say I've given up on it because that totally goes against the show. But I've resigned to the reality that wherever my wife is when it comes to her mindset on money, I need to be patient because I can't force her in and say, do it this way, or, hey, give me the money back. I'll manage from now on. Because what if I die today? She's going to need to know how to manage this. Because there's, hopefully she doesn't murder me and get the life insurance. No, I'm kidding. No, there's life insurance to take care of her. And so, my hope is that she sees the importance of budgeting, the importance of investing, the importance of not having debt, so that when I do go and there is this windfall from the life insurance, that it'll take care of her because she'll take care of it to take care of her. And, so that's a big part of why I don't just like take the money. And I don't want that level of power over her. She's my equal. We're one couple. And so, there's some decisions I've made that I think from the marriage standpoint, as far as us being equals, has been there. So I'll go earn the bacon. But I want to hand it to her to manage.
See, you're bringing up a part of the rut that I hadn't thought about. And the way I'm hearing you explain the rut, there are ruts that you have the control to change. And there are some that are tough. Like, the proverbial, you're climbing up the ladder. You want to get out of the rut, so you think you need to get a promotion, get the next job, or if you're in a business, get to the next level. But sometimes there's a but in your way, right? You can't get to that level because someone blocking the path. You don't have that control, and so you're stuck. And so how do you get out of that rut? You just have to wait, or you have to figure that. You have to make a lateral move. You have to leave the company to start your own business. You have to get uncomfortable to get comfortable, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing in the financial part. You wanted to get out of the rut, but you had, not that your wife's the big but in this case, it was your wife wasn't quite ready yet because of things she had to work out, things you had to work out. And so you weren't able to get out of the rut. You were stuck. You were kind of cruising in that particular one, and you had to be patient. You had to exercise love. You had to win her over time, which, that strengthens your marriage. But I think there's a lot of people that are in ruts. They're like, you know what? That sounds great, Ken, Jerry. I'm in a rut and I can't get out of it. And so to those men, do you have any advice for them that are in a rut that they can't just pick themselves out and do it, or maybe they can? Like, how do you speak to that man hearing this?
They've got to have that talk with their spouses. I mean, my wife and I we need to have more frequent talks. That's the big thing. And my wife's a very emotional person. I'm an emotional person. But her memories are tied in with strong emotion. So we didn't talk a lot about money in our marriage, probably once every 6 months to 12 months. And it's usually when there's a crisis. Like, What do you mean we're about to foreclose on our house? We get paid $75,000 a year. Like, we have plenty of money to pay the mortgage bill. How are we 4 months behind?
Maybe
and she's
not.
like, I forgot to pay the mortgage. I'm like, how do you forget to pay the mortgage? And so it's like, all right, what do we do to automate this and not foreclose on our house ever? And we had the money to pay off the difference. It was like a weird oversight. Like, she got so caught up in some other activity with our family. Cause again, family's the important thing. Being there for family is important. And so there was that weird thing. So, gosh, I lost my train of thought, dude.
What was just asking, like, and that's great. Like, you're a very patient husband, and that's difficult.
Oh yeah, the advice to guys.
Advice to guys.
So, there we go. Landed the plane there. Thank you,
there
man. So my brain shuts down after like 3 p.m. So this is a miracle. I'm still talking in sentences.
You're doing good.
So you gotta have the talks. And because my wife and I had infrequent talks about money, and they're usually in crisis, the emotions are high. So whenever I want to do a preventive discussion around money, like a budgeting meeting or something, she's already leery and nervous because all our talks up to a certain point have been very passionate and like we're in crisis mode. And so that's the first thing that comes to her mind, and she wants to avoid it. And so it's taken me a long time to realize that in her, that because of the way our money discussions have been through most of our marriage, that whenever I want to talk budget and, like, look, we got these big expenses coming up. How do we want to manage that? She's already like shutting down, protecting herself, putting walls up because she's preparing for a fight. And I'm like, wait, what? Why? I'm not.
You're back in Iraq.
Yeah. And I'm like, why are we getting ready for a fight? I'm saying we make this much. We're getting ready to spend this much. What's our plan to manage what we've got? So we're not dipping into savings and we're not dipping into credit cards. And that's my only goal. I want to tackle these things and not use these two resources.
But those walls are already up.
And they're already up. Yeah.
And you've tried to breach. So you're trying to climb over the wall.
Yeah.
But they're too big.
Yeah. And so it's something she's going through and she's got to navigate through. And all I could do is just present the case and give her time to think about it. And a lot of times she comes around.
But you said infrequent talks.
Yes.
Would more frequency of the conversations, or here's an example. I'm married, 5 kids, and they're all over the age group. My wife gets distracted. And when I want to talk to her and I want to tell her all the things that happened that day, and I come up to her and I can tell that she has mom brain, right? She's just got a lot of stuff going on. Let me tell you about my day. And I can see her eyes shifting from place to place. All I'm doing is adding to her stress. She's not listening. And then I get upset because she's not listening. All I would have to do, Jerry, is to say, honey, I'm noticing that it seems like you're distracted. There's, maybe I can talk to you about this at a different time. And she'll say, thank you so much. I get that. And so is it a little bit of just paying attention more to our spouse and reading those, or talking to her more? Or we like to do retreats, just her and I, or date nights every week, or weekends together. And that's not feasible for everyone, but little things like that. So what would your advice be? Because you're saying infrequent, yet high emotion because of the frequency was not enough.
Yeah.
And so what could you do? You need to come in. You need to fly that plane lower, right?
Yeah.
You need to get in when the walls are down. So how do you as a husband, and what advice for these other men listening, how can you approach your wife at the right time?
Yeah. And the one thing she's asked us to do is don't just come, because I'm always thinking about him, like, maybe the ADHD, who knows? But, I could be thinking about work one moment and a project the next, and then somewhere within a few seconds, the budget for the next 6 months in our family. Yeah, and then, like, in detail, boom. And it's like in an Excel sheet ready to be showcased, like the 10 Commandments. She's not ready for that. She says that it blindsides her. So, cause I go to her in excitement, like the thing Dave Ramsey says not to do is just like come out of nowhere with these spreadsheets. And,
yes.
And so even though I'm aware of it and I try not to do it, I still do it. And cause it's a question, I'll be like, hey, by the way, what do we still owe on the car?
Right.
And, of course, in my head, what I'm really thinking is, why do we have a car payment? But,
right.
but
during all this time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's setting up a time with her to talk about it. It's like, hey, when can we talk about the next month's expenses?
Let her have the option.
And set the time with me. When do we want to talk about it?
Right.
And then the second thing is just as hard is sticking to that time. So,
that's good.
Yeah. Cause that's the thing. Because it's still an emotional trigger for my wife.
She needs to trust you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to set this up and I'm going to follow through.
Yeah. And
that's good.
So, the thing I've had to learn to do is, even though some of the topics that come up and the discussion points that come up are passionate for me, I have to not be passionate. I have to pretend to be Spock from Star Trek, no emotion, that I'm just presenting facts, that I still love my wife. She's still a great person. This is just the information I'm presenting. So of this information, what is more important to you? This is the strategy I think we should take.
Maybe keep the why in front of you too.
Yeah.
Like, why would we want to get out of debt? Here's what I'm thinking. How about you? Do you have any reason that you'd want to be out of debt or not to have this hanging over us anymore, and get her heart engaged? Yeah.
And that's, and then again, is a mindset shift that's needed for her, because to her, debt is fine. Yeah. My mom's always had it. We've always had it. And I'm like, but your dad doesn't.
Right.
My dad's gone bankrupt twice. It's like, and I think that's the thing. Like, she doesn't want to live like her dad. So when I use her dad as an example, like, look,
Right.
your dad retired at 52, no debt. If he wants to buy a car, he pays in cash. Boom. He's like Dave Ramsey, but the Mexican version. You know, it's like he bought a house, 50,000 cash, boom, in the valley.
That's pretty
in
cool.
Texas, and just bought it. 2.5 acres. It's his, paid in full. And he was able to negotiate because he paid in cash, just like Dave Ramsey says. And it's like, that's where we need to be.
That's what you want.
Yeah, because there's freedom in that. This guy retires at 52, decides, I'm going to be a truck driver. Learns to be a truck driver. He was an electrician for Exxon. Learns to be a truck driver. Truck drives for like 2 months and says, this really sucks. It's nothing like in the movies.
Got in a rut.
I quit. And
You got in a rut.
Yeah, he's like, there's no way. Yeah, he's like, I did this to like pay for my travel, but you really don't get to leave the truck.
True.
They track you by GPS. And if you're one spot too long, they call you and say, what the heck? Get on the road again. And so he's like, no, I quit. Well, a couple months later, he wants to be a clockmaker. So he learns how to be a clockmaker, and he does it for like 2 or 3 months. He goes, this is harder than electrical work.
He's
Screw
really
this.
willing
Yeah.
to try new things, though.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lesson in that for those that are stuck places.
Yeah.
Be willing to try new things.
Financial freedom gives you the
Yeah.
freedom to do things.
Now, and in this story, this 12-year, 14 years where you're in this financial rut, I feel it. Like, I've been in that too. And we're talking about these 5 Fs, and there, any one of these listeners here can be in any one of these. They can be in 2. They can be in all 5. And we're not going to discount or say one's worse than the other. If it's a rut, it's a rut. Call it what it is. And yours is financial. Others are marriage. Others are children, family related. Others are their job. Whatever one it is, like, your story should resonate with a percentage of the people here. So I want to hear a couple things. Let's bring this to a close. So let's look at the 2020 on. I want to hear the victory in this. And then I would just love to hear, Jerry, just some of the vision for Beyond the Rut, and where do you see this going in the future? How do you get this podcast out of any rut it might be? You're close to 300 episodes, right? So I'd love to hear the vision for that, but first let's do the victory on your rut.
Yes, because there is one.
I know. I want to hear it. Let's hear it.
And the breakthrough, I kid you not, breakthrough just happened 3 weeks ago.
What?
Yes. One of the things that I mentioned earlier, I got out of the Army because I didn't want to be away from my family. And a year and a half ago, a friend of mine called me up and wanted me to be her replacement at the job she was leaving because she was going on to something else bigger and better. But the job's in Dallas. My family's in Corpus Christi. I'm in Corpus Christi.
Oh.
I'm not looking for a new job. So I entertain it because my boss says you should do it. And my VP at the time said, you should do this. You should look into it. Don't decide, just look into it. So I interviewed for this new job. So it would take me from being a manager to a director. I'd have to leave my company and go to another company. And then the other thing is the job's in Dallas, 404 miles away, door to door. And I'm like, no, like, I didn't even want to interview because, unless my family wanted to uproot and come with, I was not into it. And my wife and I talked about it. And the thing that kind of hit me and was in the back of my mind for a while is, our daughter is going to leave high school and leave us and go to college. Just like our traitorous son left us. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Jacob, I love you. You had to grow your wings and fly. It's cool, man. It's cool. But I mean, that's kind of how it felt for my wife though, because she's always wanted to have these kids and raise these kids. And well, they were jerks and they grew up on us. So anyway, to land that plane though, is I already saw ahead that our daughter's about to leave high school, go to college, leave us. That's just going to leave my wife and I. What's life going to look like for my wife and I? So that was the biggest factor to take this job. And then the agreement is I'll come home every weekend. Then I realized the drive sucks. So we were like, okay, maybe I can do a long weekend every 2 weeks. And that's what we wound up doing. So for the last 20 months, that's been what we've been doing. And my supervisor's been great in terms of letting me have that time. It's hard for him to have people work from home. And he's been gracious enough to let me do that every 2 weeks for like 3 and 4 day weekends. But I mean, that Friday and Monday I'm working from home, but I'm able to make that trip and since doing that, I've been able to see my daughter dance her final year on her high school dance team. I've been there for the holidays, for Christmas, for Thanksgiving, and so on. And COVID made it challenging because
for everybody.
Quarantines made me miss 3 whole months. I mean, like a month here, a month there, a month there. So those parts sucked. And I'm not going to lie, the drive sucks. Waco sucks. Waco's in between Dallas and Corpus. And I don't know why they're still doing construction for over a decade. That nothing looks different in that town. It's like somebody needs to investigate.
Shout out to Boston and the Big Dig.
Right?
Yeah.
So, the big breakthrough is, my daughter goes off to college in 2 weeks.
Okay.
We're going to put we're fixing the house up pretty soon. It's going on the market. It's a hot market right now.
Oh,
and
good point.
we're not greedy. So we see in the comps, I'm like, all right, I'm willing to go down a little bit to get this thing to sell at record speed and price. Our realtor said, you can get the record price and the speed. That's how hot the market is right now.
Okay.
I'll believe that when I see it. I'm okay again with dipping the price down a little bit, get it sold quickly. And then we were looking at the equity because we had in this house for 17 years. And so there's equity, not because of what we paid down, but also because how much this property is appreciated because of the market.
Yeah.
And original plan was take the proceeds, invest in rental properties. I now have cash flow coming. And, it turns out there's some expenses coming that I wasn't aware of, but now I am aware of them. And I was like, okay, we need a different game plan because, we can have these rental properties, but we're going to be still negative because living expenses in Dallas are a little bit more. So we need to trim expenses. And so I started looking at, well, if we don't have this car payment anymore, that frees up $290 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't have that car payment anymore, that frees up $490 a month.
$700.
It's like and I'm like, proceeds from house can pay off 2 cars. That increases our cash flow by what, $780? I'm like, that's more than the 2 rental properties would create. And I was like, okay, we got to pay off the 2 cars. And I was like, wait a sec. We're also going to be paying off a mortgage. So our living expenses,
$1,500.
Yeah, because we won't have a house anymore. So, we bought the house 17 years ago. So our mortgage is $805 a month.
That's still $1,600 swing on cash flow.
Yeah. So now, $805 dropped off there. Plus all the bills that went into like maintaining the house.
Sure.
Electric,
Taxes.
utilities, cable, taxes. Well, that was lumped in with the $805. So our escrow was in that as well. So we're looking at like freeing up like $2,000 a month by moving my wife up to Dallas. Now it offsets a little bit because we sent our daughter off to college.
Expenses.
So there's some costs there.
Cost of living is up.
This move is going to free up roughly $600 a month once everything's, and that's us settling into a new apartment, refurnishing some things, selling some stuff off, downsizing, no more credit card either. So again, financial rut.
And that is it paying it off and maxing it off again? Or sorry. Is it paying it and maxing it, or is that cycle stopped?
No, that cycle's still there. That's okay. Again, that rut up until that is the rut that
is the rut, but you can deal with that one because you had a big breakthrough.
Yeah. And
this is awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, Dave Ramsey's steps 1 through 4, I believe, are going to be knocked out in about a month or 2. And then my wife's going to be up there in Dallas with me, and we begin the chapter of empty nesters. And so that was part of the whole reason why I moved in the first place, was to kind of pave the way for my wife and I living together forever. That's the thing, and that's coming. And it's a big shift for her. She doesn't like change either. So in 1 month's time, and from my daughter's perspective, in 1 month's time, my daughter is going to lose the house she grew up in because, she's 18. She's lived in that house for 17. So it's essentially the only house she knows. My daughter said she's losing her mom because mom's moving to Dallas, and she's losing the 3 little kittens we just got a couple months ago. And we're like, well, one of the kittens was yours, but you gave them to us. So that's your fault. That's kind of the big shift for both of them is Liv's coming up to Dallas with me. But I'm excited because we're going to have a number of things. We're going to have some financial freedom. We're going to have some cash flow that we can set aside and start investing. We're going to have the mobility to go home to Corpus and visit our kids. We're going to have the mobility to go on vacations. It's just a brand new world.
A lot of doors open now.
Yes. And that's the thing I'm excited about. So on my personal life, that's what's happening, and that's where we're going.
And I can see, I'm sitting across from you, I can see you have lit up.
Yes.
You have lit up in the past few minutes as you've explained this.
Yeah.
Because you're back together.
Yes.
And you're out of that rut. Now, a couple things to still clear up.
Yeah.
But, who isn't going through constant change to improve? That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're showing an example right here to your audience.
Yeah.
So now, how about going forward?
Beyond the rut.
Beyond the rut. What's beyond? What is going on beyond the rut? What's happening?
So beyond the rut, many of you know that I took over around March. You heard about it finally in June or July when Brandon did the farewell episode. And for the past couple of months, I've just been not spinning my wheels, but really transferring the power over to me, I guess, or the ownership over to me. So now the domain is my name, in my name. The website hosting, the podcast hosting, all that stuff is now set and ready to go. We've gotten everything recorded to the end of the year. So the next 3 months, I'm going into like a strategy mode. I already know some of the big things I want to accomplish.
Are you going to be able to share any of those?
Yes. Beyond the Rut.
I had to ask.
I had been working on a manifesto for 6 years. That manifesto needs to come out.
Is this like a Jerry Maguire manifesto?
Kind of.
Okay.
Yeah. It's, cause there was a manifesto.
Show me the money.
Yeah. Cause Brandon, he was the original host of the show, was inspired by, a manifesto that some guy who had 6-pack abs wrote. That's all I remember, because half the manifesto was about how to get 6-pack abs. I'm like, why'd you give this to the men's group? Like, do you want us all to like start working out and dieting? I mean, I don't get it. It was called the Impossible Manifesto. So this is going to be like the Beyond the Rut manifesto, like why the 5 F's are important, why, there's a hiking analogy, look up and look forward, all that stuff. So I need to publish that because it's going to be the foundation for the show and for the platform that's to come. I'm going to hone in on the target audience. The target audience, a lot of people don't know this, but the target audience has always been Christian men in their 30s and 40s, married, who have children, have a great corporate job. They have the house, the dogs, the 2-car garage, the 2 cars in the garage, but they're stuck. They despise the commute to work, the commute home. They don't have the energy to plug into their families. They're just struggling in some way because they don't feel like they're able to have the freedom, or they don't have the freedom to really do what their dream is. And I mean, that's why I lit up when you were telling about Arctic land. Like, you're living out that dream. And you're like, what is he talking about? Go back to that episode where I interview Ken and you'll know. And so I want to hone in the messaging towards that target audience. The last 6 years have been great. But then when you listen to those shows, you don't really know who the audience is. It's an entrepreneur show. Are we a leadership show? Are we a Christian podcast? Are we about women's empowerment? We're about all those things. But more specifically, what do you, as the 30 or 40 something year old who's married with children, great corporate job, but you're not fulfilling your dream? How can we help you get there? And so the tools like Measure It to Make It, that goal setting tool, is designed to help you create that vision, put it in paper in front of you, and then start pursuing that and make that thing a reality. And so the things that come out of Beyond the Rut are to help you design that life you want to live, identify that dream, and then go pursue that without sacrificing your faith, your family, or your health. So
that was awesome. And when can the audience expect to see some of these changes coming in?
Oh man, they're gradually happening now. So because of podcast movement, I'm identifying those little things that have been holding out, or holding us back on our reach, infrastructure type of things. Like, turns out our website was not mobile friendly for 6 years.
Mine wasn't either.
And I'm like, golly, like learning how to get Google Insights and run a test on beyondtherut.com was the most depressing thing in the last 2 to 3 days. But then, in fact, that just happened yesterday.
Worse than a maxed out credit card.
Yes, just about. Cause you've been working and you realize you're in a hole, and you're like, wow, I did not know I was in a hole. So yeah, knowing that score, I changed the template or the theme, and the score went from 27 on the mobile version of the site. And the guy who told me this said it needs to be 75 or higher. And I was like, oh man. So I Googled, top mobile friendly themes in 2021, found the one that actually was on my host, switched it last night, score jumped up to 80. Yeah. I was like, that's it. That one theme was holding me back as far as the mobile platform goes on Google searches. So it'll be neat to see where that goes from here.
You just dropped an incredible nugget.
Yeah.
You just said that one theme was holding me back.
Yeah.
What if we end on this?
Sounds good to me.
Gang, what one theme in your life is holding you back? Think about that. We've touched on finances. We've touched on fatherhood and not being around and working a lot. Could be your marriage. It could be maybe just a staleness or you being stagnant or having a rut in your faith and not feeling close to God. What is the theme that's holding you back from being mobile friendly or just having a life of abundance and being able to make the impact that you were meant to make on this planet? We don't have a long time. The snap of our fingers, our kids are growing up, and we're looking at retirement. So we don't have as much time as we think. So I'm hoping that you guys got a good glimpse of what I got to see face to face. A man that is hosting this show, that's growing it to new places. He's got a sparkle in his eye and he's ready to serve. So I encourage you guys, reach out to Jerry and tell him how he can make this show better. And I know that he will do that. So Jerry, thank you so much for letting me turn the table on you and interview you here today. It was a lot of fun. I really appreciate that opportunity. And you do a great job here on the show. So thank you.
Thank you for letting me be a guest on my own show. Awesome.
I love it. I love it.
I hope that you enjoyed this episode where I opened up and shared with you, who am I? What is it that drives me? What was a struggle that I've had up until just a few months back? And if you found value in this, if you found encouragement or inspiration, and you know somebody else who will also benefit from this episode, hit the share button and send this to that person, whether it's by email or text, and let them know why you found value in the episode. And maybe they'll listen to it and they'll also share it. And that's how we get the word out so that we can all live life beyond the rut. Now, again, this was episode 300, and I am so grateful. If you've been here from the beginning over 6 years ago and you're still here listening, thank you so much for your support, for your encouragement, and so on. I know there's some of you who came on to the Rutter Nation or came into Rutter Nation years into our endeavor, like 2 or 3 years, like Scott Green from Llama Lounge. Thank you, because your weekly updates, your feedback, letting me know that this show is resonating with at least somebody out there other than my mom, means so much to me. And there's so many people to thank. I mean, 300 episodes, we've interviewed a lot of people on Beyond the Rut, and I've come across a lot of paths, even people who have not been interviewed on this show, who have poured into me in some way, shape, or form, poured into Brandon, and, you know, it's just been a great ride, and we're going to keep going. I want to see where the next 300 episodes take us. Who knows what podcasting will look like 6 years from now, but I'm in for it. Let's go for this. And again, thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking this out. Thank you for pushing yourself to live life beyond the rut into a life worth living. So until next time, go live life beyond the rut. Take care. Now, I'm so grateful that you listen to this show on a regular basis, and some folks like to show their gratitude in a monetary way. Well, now you can show that by going to beyondtherut.com/coffee, and you could buy me a cup of coffee. So whether it's 1 cup, 3 cups, or 5 cups, go ahead and go to beyondtherut.com/coffee. That'll take you over to the website for Buy Me a Cup of Coffee, and go ahead and just do that. Now, I love coffee. I usually drink it black if I'm fasting, but I'll also drop in some heavy whipping cream, maybe a little bit of sugar, and that's about it. So, and if you know me in person, you know I'm pretty darn hyper, and some of that is fueled by coffee. But what I'm going to do with the proceeds from what you give is put it into the growth of this show. So maintaining the hosting sites, the microphones, the equipment, doing upgrades, expanding this so it has a greater reach for the audience and for you. That's what we're going to do with this dough. So there you go. beyondtherut.com/coffee. Buy me a cup of coffee, and I'll be so grateful for that, and I'll put it to great use. All right. Now, until then, keep living life beyond the rut. Take care.